Long seen and arguably still seen as a niche sport, college baseball made its way into the mainstream in the mid-80s thanks to the Mississippi State baseball team with 4 future MLB All-Stars that were led by the duo that became known as Thunder and Lightning and Will Clark and Rafael Palmeiro. So let's look at these teams and the complicated duo of Clark and Palmeiro.
Totally Sportsesque. Major League.
Without a doubt, the faces of these 80s teams were Rafael Palmeiro and Will Clark, and what made the duo so interesting and in part led to future problems between the two was their different backgrounds and personalities. Will Clark grew up in Louisiana, essentially becoming a stereotypical redneck with an extroverted personality. Palmeiro, on the other hand, was more reserved. He was born in Havana in 1964, spending the first 7 years of his life there before his family left to live in South Florida. As most Cuban refugees living in Miami did, his father worked in construction, spending the few hours he had with his son at the baseball field where Palmeiro would live and develop a strong work ethic from his father. Clark also had the strong work ethic, and both him and Palmeiro became phenoms in high school, attracting plenty of attention from colleges. Clark would end up being drafted in the 4th round of the '82 draft by the Royals, while Palmeiro was taken by the Mets in the 8th round. Both did not sign and decided instead to play at Mississippi State. Palmeiro could have stayed where he was and played at Miami, but they were going to redshirt him, while coach Ron Polk told Palmeiro that he would play right away. Despite the culture change that would come about going to Mississippi State, he was on his way, as him and Clark would lead a change to college baseball. Coach Ron Polk hyped these two up as being really good and capable of playing as freshmen, which was and still is uncommon. And all I could do was just say they were really good, because it's not like they had some star system or could hype them up with a highlight reel on Instagram. But soon everyone took notice, and they first noticed Palmeiro as he would start right away, while Clark started the season as a late-inning defensive replacement and a pinch runner. And from the beginning, Palmeiro became the talk of the town, as he was carrying the team as a freshman, with an ability to hit line drives wherever he wanted, while rarely striking out and keeping to himself with his laid-back personality. Then halfway through the season, Will Clark would get the chance to play, and this changed everything, as he proved to be a massive addition. With his extroverted personality and competitive spirit, he would steal some of the spotlight from Palmeiro, as Clark was more of the power hitter instead of the line drive hitter, though Palmeiro had no problem putting the ball over the fence. And with these two, fans are showing up in droves, and doing so early to watch these two take batting practice to hear the ting of their metal bats. In this time, college baseball was, and really still is, a niche sport, especially in comparison to other college sports like football, basketball, and nepotism. But teams, especially in the SEC, had and still do have great atmospheres, and Mississippi State is one of those, with tons of space, that allowed fans to use everything past the outfield fence for tailgating, as barbecue smoke would line the entire outfield. And more came to watch these two. And the reason Mississippi State baseball began to expand past just a regional space was coinciding with the rise of these two was the rise of ESPN. Never before would college baseball be shown and covered on TV, but a 24-hour sports channel would find time for it. So really, for the first time, college baseball was being put on the map as Will Clark finished his 1983 freshman year, playing in 49 games with 95 at-bats, hitting 8 home runs with a .337 average and a 1.069 OPS. And as already mentioned, Palmeiro played full-time throughout the entire year, playing 57 games with 234 at-bats, hitting 18 home runs, while hitting .406 with a 1.219 OPS, while striking out just 11 times. These two would help lead the team to a 42-15 record to qualify for regionals. And this time, the winner of the either 4 or 6 team regional went to the College World Series, before what we have now with the Super Regionals that will eventually turn into the Super Duper Regionals. And in 1983, Mississippi was rolling to start, winning their first 3 games against Tulane, Texas, and Texas Pan American, putting them in the regional championship. They had to beat Texas just once, but lost 2 in a row to the Roger Clemens-led Longhorns, who went on to win the national championship. Not the last of these two in this era. Despite this, Mississippi State knew that they had a lot to look forward to with these two. And these two would gain the nickname of Thunder and Lightning. It wasn't exactly clear who was who, but the name fit perfect for their performance and their different personalities. And the best part of having a deadly duo back-to-back in the lineup is it forces pitchers to go after the 3-hitter because the next man up isn't any better. And it was seen as these two would have similar dominating seasons. In their 1984 sophomore years, Will Clark would play 61 games with 215 at-bats, hitting 20 more home runs than he did as a freshman with 28, while driving in 93 and hitting .386 with a 1.347 OPS. While Palmeiro would play the same number of games with 236 at-bats, hitting 29 home runs with 94 RBIs, while hitting .415 with a 1.376 OPS, and striking out just 10 times. Just besting Clark in all those categories, including hitting 1 more home run and driving in 1 more run than him. Palmeiro was named an All-American for the second straight year, and Clark would for the first time, and the reason Clark wasn't consensus is because USC first baseman Mark McGwire was ahead of both of these two with 32 home runs. They finished with a 45-16 record, and once again found themselves in the regional final. And once again, they came up short, losing this time at home to New Orleans, where Will Clark grew up. A very disappointing loss that would be a motivating factor going into the next season. But before that season, a big event for this duo in all college baseball came in the summer. For the first time, baseball was a part of the Olympics taking place in Los Angeles. It was going in as a demonstration sport, meaning it was just for promotion of the sport and no medals would be given out. And as always the case, the few times baseball has been in the Olympics, the United States team was made up of college and minor league players. And with a team that featured the likes of Barry Larkin, Shane Mack, Bobby Witt, B.J. Suroff, and Mark McGwire, Palmeiro and Clark were told that they didn't even need to try out. But the problem was, since Palmeiro was not a U.S. citizen, he could not play for the team. And though he couldn't have, Cuba withdrew from the Olympics as a result of the Soviet-led boycotts. Clark would go on to have a great Olympics, as they finished runner-up to Japan. And this brought even more hype going into the 1985 season, which was going to be the last chance for this team, as Clark and Palmeiro were 100% going pro after their junior seasons, with projections for both to be top 5 picks. And aside from just these two, the 1985 Mississippi State team had a great supporting cast. This team would ultimately have 12 players drafted, and aside from of course Clark and Palmeiro, the two biggest pieces were Jeff Brantley and Bobby Thigpen. Brantley would undoubtedly be the ace of this team, and Bobby Thigpen played a role many college players had, in that many times he would play 8 innings in the outfield, then come in to pitch in the 9th, just like all of us in Little League. And with these two leading the pitching and Thunder and Lightning in the lineup, Mississippi State would have the program's best season to that point. In his junior year, Palmeiro actually declined plenty from his previous 2 years, but again, he set the bar very high. In 65 games, with 250 at-bats, he had exactly 300, with 20 home runs and 67 RBIs, with a 976 OPS. Again, that only looks bad in comparison to his 2 previous years, but was very solid. And as for Clark, his 1985 season is one of the best a college players ever had. In 65 games, with 224 at-bats, he had 25 home runs, with 77 RBIs, while hitting .420 with a 1.392 OPS, aided by an additional 12 doubles. You can argue his sophomore year was better, but his junior year made him a part of college baseball history, as it was good enough to take home the Golden Spikes Award, the only Bulldog to win the award, as him and Palmeiro were both All-Americans again, as Ron Polk took home Coach of the Year, as they would finish with a 50-15 record, as unlike the previous 2 years, they were able to win the SEC, this time being huge favorites to win the entire thing as the tournament started, and the odds improved as things went on. They beat West Virginia 10-1 in the first game of the regionals, then got revenge on New Orleans in Game 2 by winning 8-4. And then in front of their home crowd, they had to beat the Barry Larkin-led Michigan Wolverines just once in 2 games, and things didn't look good as they lost Game 1 14-6. But the offense exploded in Game 2 as they won 19-8 to finally get over the hump after the past 2 years going into the College World Series as the most popular team and still the favorites. In the first game, they went up against Oklahoma State, who had the home run and RBI leader, MP Incavaglia, and they won 12-3. And before the second game, as was the case during the time, the MLB draft took place during the College World Series. So before they played against Arkansas, Will Clark would find out that he was the second overall pick, going to the San Francisco Giants, while Palmeiro ended up being the 22nd pick, going to the Chicago Cubs. Perhaps declining from his first 2 seasons hurt his draft stock, but still, these two became first-round picks just minutes before playing this game. And in this game, Mississippi State would win 5-4, securing a spot in the semifinals, the furthest they had ever gone to that point. Will Clark went 3-for-4 with a home run, just hours after getting picked second in the draft. So, he had a pretty good day. Fans lined up hours in advance to get tickets for the winner's bracket matchup between Mississippi State and Texas. And to start that game, the Bulldogs were cruising with their number 2 starter, Gene Morgan, rolling. But to start the 5th, a line drive would hit Morgan in the ankle. After checking on him, Morgan told coaches that he could continue. And he did, but was definitely not the same. And Texas would erase that 4-run deficit and pile on to win 12-7. But since the College World Series is double elimination, Mississippi State was still alive and was set to face Miami in the elimination bracket. On a 95-degree day, Bobby Thigpen would hit a go-ahead grand slam in the 6th to put them up 4-3. Jeff Brantley started the game on 3 days rest and pitched into the 9th on that hot day, and with 126 pitches, he was running on fumes. and after walking the leadoff batter in the bottom of the ninth in a 5-4 game, Thigpen came in from right field to try to close the game. And what made college baseball interesting in this time is that with the non-BB core aluminum bats, leads could easily change on one pitch. And on Thigpen's fourth pitch, Greg Allana changed the lead and ended the game with a 2-run walk-off home run. And with this, suddenly the college careers of Clark and Palmeiro, along with plenty others on the team, was over. And interestingly, the previous year they lost to a team that played in Clark's hometown, then the next year, they lost to a team that played in Palmeiro's hometown. And to make the loss even more painful, Miami would beat the team they lost to in the freshman year twice to win the College World Series. That Miami team would end up having no major league players, while on the other hand, what happened in the aftermath of that season added to the 1985 Mississippi State team. As already mentioned, 12 players from this team would get drafted, and 4 would make it to the majors, and they all had great careers. All 4 would make the All-Star team, with Clark and Palmeiro making multiple. And actually Thigpen and Brantley's only All-Star appearance came in the same year, in 1990, with Will Clark there as well. Thigpen would win Relief Man of the Year that year, and Brantley would win the same award in 96. These two make the 85 team even more remarkable, but the main story of Clark and Palmeiro also becomes more remarkable with what happened in their major league careers. Clark would play 15 seasons, making the All-Star team 6 times, while winning 2 Silver Sluggers and a Gold Glove, becoming a Giants legend. Palmeiro made the All-Star team 4 times, won 3 Gold Gloves, and 2 Silver Sluggers. Actually a surprisingly low number of accolades when looking at his stats. Palmeiro was just one of 7 players who ever hit 500 home runs and record 3,000 hits, being the 4th to ever do so. Obviously that should make him a lock for the Hall of Fame, but off-field issues kept him from Cooperstown and further derailed his relationship with Will Clark. The relationship came to a head after 1993. After a subpar season for Clark, he decided to test free agency after not getting what he wanted from the Giants. Meanwhile, Palmeiro also became a free agent after playing 6 years with the Rangers, and was offered 5 years and $26 million. The two were going to work together with Palmeiro wanting to set the market in Texas. But then, Clark signed a 5-year, $30 million contract with the Rangers, something that did not sit well with Palmeiro, who was coming off a 37 home run, 105 RBI season. He would later say on Clark, "That's the way he is. He's got no class. Friendship didn't matter to him. He was looking out for himself. I don't think much of Will. He's a lowlife." Palmeiro then went on to sign a 5-year, $30+ million contract with the Orioles, and this whole ordeal must have awoken something in him, because starting in 1995, he had 8 straight seasons with at least 38 home runs and 100 RBIs, despite never leading the league in home runs. These two actually switched teams in 1999, with Clark going to the Orioles while Palmeiro went back to the Rangers, with these two not talking to each other throughout this time. And the relationship in Palmeiro's public perception took a massive blow in 2005 with the release of Jose Canseco's book, in which he said that he injected Palmeiro with steroids. And in March of that year, he famously went in front of Congress and sternly said,
"I have never used steroids, period."
A shadow was cast over him, as the public wasn't very supportive in his chase for 3,000 hits. Palmeiro in fact wore earplugs during a game to drown out the noise. And that all came to a front when he would be suspended for 10 days in August after testing positive for a steroid known as Sanazolo. Palmeiro denied ever intentionally taking steroids, though he suggested a supplement provided to him by Miguel Tejada, which supposedly was B12, could have been tainted, though there had never been sufficient evidence of this. And Tejada later being implicated in the Mitchell Report, which Palmeiro also appeared on, adds to his case. But the stigma around Palmeiro never left him despite constantly denying his intended use. And despite having the credentials of a first ballot Hall of Famer, he received just 11% of the vote in his first ballot, and was off the ballot just 4 years later. The entire situation only added more disdain between Palmeiro and Clark, who passionately avoided taking steroids, with Clark saying that he didn't feel bad for him in the midst of the public outcry against Palmeiro. A saga that only adds to their time on the Mississippi State team and made their duo even more memorable. These two needed each other for protection in the lineup and for motivation. The competitiveness to outdo each other only made them better, and the fallout may have created one of the best offensive stretches a player's ever had, regardless if he was taking steroids or not. The two reportedly began communicating again about 10 years ago, after decades of being distant, and it's easier for them to reflect on their time at Mississippi State, in which they are arguably the 2 most important players in college baseball history, and the fact that they put the sport on the map. Though again, it's not the powerhouse that football and basketball are, many were introduced to college baseball because of these two, and what they did in their post-college careers only adds to it. And that stacked 1985 team not being able to win it all just shows the way baseball is, as thunder and lightning couldn't overpower a hurricane.